Hello and welcome to the Game Changers podcast. I'm Sue Anstis, a founding trustee of the Women's Sport Trust and CEO of Promote, one of the UK's leading sports communications agencies. I am so grateful to Barclays for supporting this series of the Game Changers, which will focus on trailblazing women in football. In 2019, Barclays announced the biggest ever sponsorship of women's sport in the UK, as the Barclays FA Women's Super League became Europe's first fully professional women's football league. A huge amount of Barclays investment also went into establishing the Girls Football School Partnerships, with the aim of ensuring that all girls in England have equal access to football as boys. And giving girls the same opportunities in football is certainly something that's close to the heart of my guest today. Dame Sue Campbell is Director of Women's Football at the FA and regarded by many as one of the most respected people in sport. Sue began her career as a PE teacher in the early 70s before going on to lecture in PE at Loughborough and Leicester Universities. She was a CEO at the National Coaching Foundation, where we first met in the early 90s. And in 1995, Sue helped to found the Youth Sport Trust and went on to be CEO and then chair for many years. Sue was chair of UK Sport from 2003 to 2013, overseeing a step change in the delivery of British medals at the Olympics and Paralympics. In 2008, Sue was appointed to the House of Lords as a crossbench peer, and earlier this year, she became a Dame in the Queen's New Year's Honours List. I was lucky enough to meet Sue at the House of Lords for our interview, and you can certainly hear the workings of the House in the background, with the division bell ringing occasionally to call members to the chamber. We found a quiet corner in the magnificent building, and I began by asking Sue where her love of sport started.
Very much as a child, with incredible support from my parents. Any sport I wanted to try, from ice skating to, football to whatever, I was given the opportunity to do. So my love of the outdoors, my love of playing sport came from those days.
And in these podcasts, we often hear people talk about their female PE teachers way back when, and I know you've mentioned yours too. So can you tell us a little bit about her?
Well, I had two teachers who had a big impact on me. One, surprisingly, was my primary teacher when I was 5 and 6, 7. It was Mrs. Jury, and Mrs. Jury loved the outdoors, and she taught us all sorts of things. I'm not sure she knew the rules of many of them, but she encouraged us. That's where I first learned to play in a team as opposed to on my own and play with others, which is something you have to learn. And then when I went to secondary school, my PE teacher was a Mrs. Sheila Bassett, married to Ron, who was the men's PE teacher. And she was fantastic and a very good teacher, but also a really good mentor. And I wasn't doing very well academically, just couldn't apply myself. I was too busy looking out the window. And she did a really good job of sitting me down, helping me plan a future path, and really encouraging and supporting me to sort of apply myself academically so I could get the qualifications to go on and be a PE teacher.
Excellent. And you played football as a girl on the streets and at school as well. Do you think that football might have been your chosen sport if you'd had the opportunities that are there now? Would you have been a wildcat that went on to be a lioness, do you think?
I'd like to think I'd have become a lioness. Football would have been the sport of my choice. I know this sounds absurd, but I didn't realise in a sense that girls didn't play this game. From a very early age, I played with the boys. I never saw any other girls playing, but it never dawned on me. I think in that era we weren't that aware of, whether we were boys or girls or what we were. And there was no pressure on me to not play. Yeah, I think without any doubt I would have carried on playing football. And, one of the great things I admire about today's lionesses is that many of them were confronted with the same message. Girls don't play football, but they didn't allow that to stop them. And that's why I respect and admire them. So they found another way so that they could carry on playing the sport they loved.
And you went on to play netball for England, but that wasn't your first love. I didn't realise the ice skating, but athletics as well featured, discus and pentathlon.
Yeah, I was a sort of jack of all trades and master of none, really. I just loved anything. And I always loved testing myself. And the commitment to get better at whatever I did. So after 5 attempts, I won the All England School Athletics Championships throwing the discus. Yeah. But also at college, at PE College, I entered British University's pentathlon and won that. So I was British University's champion at the pentathlon, which was the precursor to the heptathlon. And then I was also playing netball at the same time, got into the England under-21s, captain of the England under-21 netball team, and I guess put all my energies then for a while into both, and then chose netball.
And how did your experience then as representing England, do you think, differ from the Roses and the experience they have today?
Oh, crikey, chalk and cheese. I think, you have to remember that I was doing all this when Queen Victoria was on the throne. International sport was just a very different thing. It was, you bought or borrowed your kit, you had to contribute to travel. There was no nutritionist, psychologist, physiologist. My training for England was in a gym on my own, throwing a ball at a wall. That's how I trained every night. And I would go and work out for an hour, and then just, I had no idea whether I was doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but I was sweating and running and working, and I assumed it was right. But there was no evaluation of your physical condition or helpful training regimes. It was just, you got there by sheer personal effort.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that transformation across that time in terms of sports tech and science and that investment. Do you ever yearn for the days of more, not real sport, but sport for sport without the science?
Yeah, I know what you mean by that sort of pure sport in that sense. I guess I was part of the revolution, because when I was at the National Coaching Foundation, we took all the ologies, as I call them, and put them into bite-sized chunks and created this market stall approach. So our coach education was only the ologies, and it was married with the sports technical and tactical knowledge. And to begin with, many sports didn't want what I had to offer, but gradually everybody adopted it, and now nobody thinks twice about the fact that the ologies are a fundamental part of preparation. And I do think, however many ologies you've got and however brilliant they are, it comes back to that individual's desire in themselves to want to be the best. That isn't something you can give someone. No. You can provide them with all the support in the world, but they've got to want it, and they've got to be able to make the sacrifices and do the hard work that gets them to the top.
That doesn't come from a lab or anything.
It doesn't come from a scientist. No. It comes from inside. I remember going and watching going up cycling where Dave Brailsford was, and watching Chris Hoy, who'd just done a full session in the velodrome but was on a stationary bike, going. Everybody else had gone to the dressing room, and Dave said, whether I was here or not, that guy has his own motivation. Yeah. He wants to be the best. It's inside him, just like a Steve Redgrave, a Catherine Granger, Jess Ennis-Hill. Look at someone like Jess. She wasn't built to be a heptathlete. Right. She's tiny compared to most of the heptathletes, but she wanted to do it, and she had such great determination. Yeah. And any of these great athletes that you look at in any sport, it comes from within. You can surround them with the best, but you can't do it for them. Yeah.
And you were, I believe, the first female lecturer at Loughborough University?
First
or one of the
full-time lecturer in physical education. Yeah, I was. Loughborough was a physical education college, and there was a technology college on the hill, and the two combined to be Loughborough University. And Loughborough had always been a men's PE college, but because we were combining going up on the hill with the university, they were going to admit women. They were a little worried about women's things. I never quite found out what women's things were. So they invited me to join the staff to look after the women. I didn't realise that was the case. I was there to look after women's things.
You did a good job. Yeah. I was proud to follow in being a student there. And it was wonderful last year to be present when you were inducted into the Loughborough Hall of Fame. And obviously you've had so many influential roles since then. But I wonder what drove you beyond your early career as a PE teacher at Moss Side. You talk about that a bit, but how did that experience, you think, shape the rest of your career?
Unquestionably shaped. Well, I've always said I'm a bit schizophrenic. I have two really deeply ingrained things I'm passionate about. One is young people, but what the experience in Whalley Range made me realise that it wasn't just sport for sport's sake, it was how you could use sport to change lives. So the ultimate objective wasn't necessarily that you were going to produce good sportsmen and women, well, women particularly, but that you had given them a better chance in life. And that has lived with me and followed me through the work I did when I worked for Sports Council in the inner city, when I worked at the Youth Sport Trust. And then the other part of me has always been this fascination with excellence. The youth sport thing comes right from inside my heart. It's me, I think. I think it's me, Sue Campbell, and realising just how much sport shaped my life, but recognising how important it can be for young people. You know, whether it's to improve their health, their behaviour, their togetherness, the cohesion of communities, all of that stuff that we've talked about is really important. But I have this other fascination, and that fascination is how do you create an environment in which you can take people who have the dreams, who have the aspiration, and help them be the best that they can be. So those two strands have kind of followed me through life, really, and I've bobbed between the two.
Brought them together as well, but come on to some of the youth sport trusts using one.
Yeah, Youth Sport Trust and UK Sport was sort of an expression of those two. You know, one Youth Sport Trust was my desire to use sport to change lives, and UK Sport was my fascination with excellence and achieving the Olympic medal target. What football's given me is a chance to pull those into one family, and to create a strategy which looks at both of those and has a sort of holistic view of how you can do both successfully.
You and I first met early 1990s when you were heading up National Coaching Foundation and I was working for Quaker Oats, and you did a fabulous job of encouraging us to spend money, funnily enough, to sponsor some of your programmes. That's never changed, has it?
No.
So I wonder what you feel now. I guess it's almost 30 years on, but in terms of the recognition that coaches get for all that they contribute, do you think that's changed across that time?
I'd like to say yes. I'm not sure it has. I think at the top level people talk more. Certainly in football people talk about the team manager, who's the boss of the coaches or the coaching leader. Not always the person wearing the tracksuit, Martin, but the person who manages what's happening in training and in practice and selection and all the other things. But really, could we name the coaches of our Olympic champions? Perhaps one or two, but not many. And certainly down at grassroots level, those coaches that go standing in the rain Tuesdays and Thursdays and supporting young people develop their skills, I just think they're unsung heroes that we just have never really understood or invested in the way that we should, and certainly not given the profile that they should have.
And do you think that will change? I mean, it almost needs to change if we want more voluntary coaches.
You know, there are many people who get involved in volunteering in sport who are not looking for somebody to give them a gong or a medal or pay them, but they do want to feel part of something. They want to feel like they belong. And I think the place I recognised how well we did that was around the London Olympics. The volunteer workforce there, you still see people in those shirts, right? I hope they've washed them, but 8 years on, they're still in those shirts, and that's because they felt part of something. And that's what most people want. They're not looking for somebody to pay them lots of money. They're looking to make a difference, to improve opportunities, but also to feel like they belong to something bigger than just their own small effort. And that's why, we're at the FA launching this Playmaker programme. It's a rip-off, really, of what happened in London 2012, but it's an attempt to say, can we build an army of volunteers that we value, that feel like they're part of the big mission, and that have a sense of belonging and a sense of achievement that's beyond just their own contribution.
Yeah, excellent. And in terms of elite sport, so females, and obviously the Game Changers podcast is very much about trailblazing women. So in terms of senior female performance directors and so on, it does feel like there's not enough of those. Is that something that you would recognise and hope will change in the future?
Yeah, I mean, when I first went into UK sport, the number of medals being won by women was a very small percentage of the overall medal count. Now it's 50-50, and I think this time going to Tokyo, it looks like there'll be more female athletes than male athletes. So in terms of the playing of the sports or the participation, has definitely improved. But in terms of leadership roles like coaching, officiating, administration, boardroom, still a huge job to do, massive job to do. And part of that, I think, is making sure that first step on that run is not too big a rung, and the perception is it's not for me. And I think the only way to do that is to get more women over a much lower hurdle in the first instance, because they're more than competent. It's confidence. It's how do we step over that line. So things like our Wildcats programme, encouraging the mums standing around there to say, hey, we've got this programme you can do at home, you can acquire some skills and knowledge, and then you can become an assistant. We've got to find an easier way to get people in, and then having got them in, we've got to find a way of nurturing and developing them. And when I first came into football and I looked how many A-licensed women coaches we'd got, they weren't huge, but we did have quite a number. Not one of them felt loved by us or valued or felt there was something there for them. And now Audrey Cooper oversees the whole of that for women's coaching. And Audrey has just launched a really exciting, innovative programme for our top coaches about developing them as leaders and managers of the future. Excellent. So, at every stage, whether it's recruitment and retention, whether it's progression, or whether it's consolidation and growth at the top, we've now got a strategy in place for coaching. Jo Stimpson's trying to do the same thing in refereeing, slightly tougher in all sorts of ways. So it's about how do you create a pathway, just like you do for the performer, that allows you to progress and get to the top if you want to.
Excellent. That's good. That's really good to hear. It's positive looking forward, and I guess hope to see some change in the future there too.
We have to see some change in the future, not hope. We have to.
Taking you back a little bit then to the Youth Sport Trust, and I've heard you often talk about parasport, as we've alluded to there, to perhaps bring kids back from that wayward edge, being pulled back into sport and how sport changes lives. Why do you feel that sport has that power to reach those children, especially those that might be alienated, as you mentioned, from traditional academics and so on?
Well, I guess I was that child to some degree. But I think if we only engage with young people through an intellectual medium, there are going to be many young people who can't make that journey. That doesn't mean to say intellectual young people don't need to be physically active too, they do. But if you're talking about the young people we're talking about, I think there are three things. Sport can give you a strong sense of belonging, something we just talked about. And for many young people, they're searching for that. That's why we have gangs. That's why we have groups that get together and sometimes do bad things as well as good things, because they want to feel part of something. Everybody wants to belong. And, if for whatever reason your family isn't a tight unit, or, you're left on your own a lot of kids nowadays talk about feeling isolated because of our digital gadgets that we've all got. So they've got lots of people they communicate with, but no real friends. Yeah. So that notion of isolation needs to get broken. So you need to use sport to create that sense of belonging. That doesn't mean you've got to be part of a team, but it means you can be part of a group that's engaged in something. The second bit is, so many of these kids want challenge. They want something that tests them. I remember once talking to a young man who had been stealing cars, and I asked him to describe it to me. And as he described it to me, I said, I know exactly how you felt. And he said, why, have you stolen a car? And he said, no, I've played netball for my country. I said, and what you describe, that dryness of your mouth and the excitement and hearing your brain, hearing your heart in your head. I said, that's all that excitement. I introduced him to rock climbing and said to the guy who was teaching him, dangle him for all you're worth, off the rock, frighten the devil to death, right? And it changed his life. Wow. It's so simple because there's certain things kids are looking for. They want danger, they want a bit of risk, and we're so risk averse with our kids. They want to belong. And thirdly, I think like puppies, anybody who's got a dog will tell you, the only way you can control a dog is to give it enough exercise, right? It needs discipline, but it needs exercise. Yeah. If you've got a puppy, as I've got at the moment, and you don't give it enough exercise, it's naughty, it chews everything, it wrecks your house. Yeah. You give enough exercise, it sleeps soundly when it's in the house, right? Yeah. I think kids need that expression of their physical self as well as all this intellectual stuff. So I'm really passionate that sport and music can engage kids in a way that the more academic subjects or intellectual interests don't do. And particularly for the kids at risk, I think it's a wonderful way of reaching out. And many of our community trusts belonging to our EFL and Premier League clubs do a fantastic job using sport in their local communities. So I'm very passionate about that.
And when we see, and you alluded earlier, didn't you, to social cohesion and educational attainment, all those amazing things sport does, it does still seem that it's not quite recognised by government departments and it's not embedded in the system perhaps as we would like. Why is that? That's a big question, isn't it? And what can we do?
Yeah, it's one of my biggest regrets of my whole professional career, because I feel I've been banging on about it for 50 years. It's not that successive governments don't see the value in being physically active or sport. it's just nobody's ever created no overall. I mean, I think under the Labour government from 97 through to 2010, we did begin to create an overarching strategy. This can't be done piecemeal. This has got to be Department of Health, Department for Education, Department of Culture, Media and Sport, and probably the Home Office in terms
transport.
of... Those are the four, though, that have got to sit together and have a national strategy. And what we get is lots of initiatives with money. So it isn't money, there's no coordination. The analogy I would give is we've got money going straight to the athlete, but we've got no coach. We've got no team plan. We've got no way of making all these pots of money and all these initiatives make more sense. Yeah. And that's what's missing for me. You know, we somehow fail to get policymakers and politicians to understand it. I mean, I think the only person who truly understood the power of sport as a political tool was Nelson Mandela. You know, the way he wore the Springbok jersey as he presented the World Cup, that was an example of someone recognising that you could make a statement in a sporting arena that had massive political implications for his rainbow nation. We've not had politicians who've been prepared to do that. I think the closest we had was Tony Blair. When Tony Blair was in office, he was passionate about sport and he really believed in it.
You were sort of figurehead of school PE for so long through the Youth Sport Trust, 8 years there. And then at that time of change of government, and then suddenly to lose that funding, that must have been so heartbreaking at the time. How did you deal with that personally, and to support your team and the PDMs and the people out in the community?
I mean, the worst part was all the phone calls I received from thousands of people, head teachers, partnership development managers, school sport coordinators saying, please do something. And I tried everything. There was nothing left in my repertoire. So it was like, you know, having started in 97 with a few bricks and a concept of a house, and then slowly built the house and just about to finish putting the roof on, the house got burnt down. And it was like watching it burning down with my hands tied behind my back, having spent essentially 13, 14 years building it. It was brutal, and the worst part was people's despair, trying to deal with other people's despair. But you know, the one thing I always say is, in life, you have to have a strong moral purpose, and you have to know why you do things, beyond the practicalities of what you're doing. And it was young Debbie Foote, 17, from Lincoln, who organised a march of 2012 young people up Downing Street, handed in a petition which she'd personally pulled together with 750,000 signatures on it. And they said they were going to do all this. They didn't want me with them. I said, thanks a lot. But they said, we'd like to meet you on the green out here afterwards. And as I watched them walk back down Downing Street with the taxis hooting, and they all had Save School sports shirts on, I suddenly remembered what my moral purpose was, right? And my moral purpose wasn't a structure or even a strategy. It was, could I use sport to empower young people to stand up for themselves, to be proud, to have the courage to take things on? And there they were walking down the road towards me, and I was thinking, come on, you, stop feeling sorry for yourself and get back on the horse, because I literally had been sitting in the stable really hoping it had all changed, and it had gone. So at that point, we rebuilt ourselves. We started again, and I remember showing the staff a picture of a boat tossing violently in the sea. We had to let go 2/3 of our staff, and about 3,000 people got made redundant in the system. It was horrendous. And I remember showing this boat tossing in the sea, and I said, there are 3 questions as captain of the ship you ask yourself. One is, will the ship survive? And I said, this ship will survive because it's built on values and a set of beliefs that absolutely will hold it together. Secondly, how many of the crew are you going to lose overboard? And I said, we've lost all the crew we're going to lose. The ones that are on, I've kept you because I want you to sail the boat, and I know you can do it. And the third question you ask yourself is, where the dickens is the land? And I said, I haven't a clue, but together we'll work it out, right? And right now I don't know where we're going, but we'll find a way.
You mentioned earlier that your career has almost had 2 pathways, of that sport performance and getting the best from individuals and teams, and then sport for good and the power to change lives. And you obviously chaired UK Sport at the most successful period in terms of winning medals. So did you ever think that the performance of those athletes, because how did you see they could impact everyday people?
Well, I think we sometimes believe that excellence can inspire people to participate, and I think to some degree it can. But you have to make sure that when those individuals show up to participate, there's coaches and others to help them. Otherwise, it's a bit, you know, it's like Wimbledon, you know, you watch it and kids rush down to the tennis court and there's a big hole in the tennis court and the net's not there and you can't get the ball over the net and suddenly you don't want to do it anymore. But if you provide the right coaching, the right support, the right opportunities. So I think it can help with participation. But I think more importantly, something I was talking to Catherine Granger about yesterday actually, which is I think elite athletes, the important part is not the medal or the success, it's the journey. And it's the journey around the fact that they have to overcome barriers, they have setbacks, all the things that we all deal with in life and all children deal with. So for me, the success factors, what it takes to get to the top, is exactly the same things as it takes to get to the top in business, it gets to the top in anything. And if we want to inspire young people, it's those stories that we need to tell, not lauding the medal, but understanding the journey.
How they got there,
You know, if you listen to Karen Carney, Catherine Granger, you know, Nicola Adams, you listen to the people who have done exceptional things, it's their journey that is incredible. The things they do to get where they want to, their determination, their resilience, their stick at it, their moments of self-doubt, their ability to come out of those, you know, all of that, all the traumas, all the ups and downs, that's what we all live through day in and day out. It's that is the inspiration for me.
I love the bell ringing. Shows where we are. And obviously millions were spent in moving us up the medal table. And I just wonder whether you've ever had that internal conflict to think of how that money might have been spent in terms of embedding sport in schools, PE teachers, coaches, facilities, if that money had been used elsewhere.
No, I've had that conversation many times, you know, and the reality was the whole time we were spending money on elite sport, Sport England was spending at least twice as much on participation, and Sport Scotland and Sport Wales and Sport Northern Ireland. So it wasn't just
in isolation.
I think if I use the analogy of Formula One, you could argue Formula One is ridiculously expensive, and it is. But in terms of technological developments that affect day-to-day cars, in terms of new ideas, new bits of industry, innovation, they're affecting mass car production all the time. Excellence in sport is one, about dreams and showing people that dreams are possible. Two, it's about the pride of our nation. I mean, you know, whether you like it or not, London was exceptional. It transformed London's personality. People spoke to each other on the tube. People got up and chatted about things. It was completely different because it unites people. You know, 11.7 million watched the Lionesses play the semi-final against the USA. And, you know, you only have to see the pictures of people in pubs and, you know, it unites us in a way very little else can in this day and age. You know, we need to be united as a nation, and sport can do that. And we shouldn't underestimate that. We can't put a number on it, but we shouldn't underestimate it. You know, all this research that shows when your local football team wins, your productivity goes up in local business. There's a whole raft of reasons why sport matters. And sporting excellence, sporting participation should be good bedfellows, and there shouldn't be a choice. It should be an integrated approach that uses excellence to drive what you're hoping to achieve, not just in participation, but in social and community development.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. And after your amazing time at UK Sport, you took the role as head of the women's game at the FA, and I must confess, perhaps I was a bit surprised at the time, but what attracted you to that role? Was it a difficult decision for you to make?
Yes, I did dither a long time, but only because of my age, let me say. I came out of my experience at UK Sport and my youth sport trust experience, and I genuinely thought it's time to give me, Sue Campbell, a bit of time. And then Kelly Simmons and Martin Glenn, the then CEO of the FA, asked to meet me and asked me if I would consider going in. And I remember the conversation with Martin. I said, look, Martin, I don't want to work 5 days a week. He said, well, how many days will you give me? I said 3. He said, OK. And I thought, oh, dear, this isn't working very well.
Like it's going well.
This isn't what I'm after. I said, and I don't want to be based. I want to be based at home. Yes, you can do that. I went, oh, OK. So it went. So eventually I did say no initially, and then I thought about it. And if you ask me why did I do it, yes, of course, I love football. I've loved it since I was a child. But that wasn't the reason I did it. I did it because the FA is the most powerful brand in sport. You know, you might not like that, but it is. It speaks to millions of people in millions of homes. And I thought, I wonder if this is my last chance to really get girls and women's sport understood, valued, and used as a driver for social change. Because if you can't do it with the FA, you probably can't do it. So I came, and within a very short space of time, I was doing 6 days a week.
Not always from home.
Always, never at home. But that's the nature of something where you're more of a missionary than you are I've never done a job, really. I've never really worked. I've been on a mission. And each mission I've had's just been, that's driven me. I'm not really interested in a job. I'm never really worried about salaries, or none of those things bother me. And I've got all these, I'm a baroness and a dame, and you think, crikey. But I never set out to have those things, and it doesn't, I feel very privileged and I'm proud of those things, and I wish to goodness my parents were alive to see it all. It's not what motivates me. Yeah. I'm motivated by mission.
And looking back in terms of women's football and the ban in 1920, nearly 100 years ago, isn't it, by the FA, how much do you think that has then impacted attitudes and mindsets today? Do you think that's still...
Well, it gave us 50 years of silence, which wasn't...
ideal.
Wasn't perfect. And the people who pioneered it, in the 70s, I often, you've heard me say on other things, I stand on their shoulders. I mean, if those women hadn't had that courage to get involved, get it, drive it, begin to establish it again, we wouldn't be where we are today. But I do think we still have a long way to go to win hearts and minds, that women's game is worthy of standing alongside the men's game. I still think there are a lot of people who are patronising about it. There are a lot of people who are deeply sarcastic about it. It is changing, but it'll change with a generation, and that's why what we're doing in schools really matters. Because if we get those little boys in schools to recognise girls can play, and we get those little boys to respect girls can play, as they come through, that this won't be an unusual thing to do, it'll be a normal thing to do. So when we're putting these programmes, yes, we're wanting girls to have fun, enjoy it, make friends, develop their social links and play football. But we're also wanting boys to go, crikey, that girl can play. Yeah. And I think we're hearing that. We're starting to hear that from the next generation. It is a generational thing. However, I've taken people to women's football matches who I've virtually had to drag, screaming and kicking to get them there. And within 10 minutes they're going, oh, this is really good. This is how football used to be. Yeah. There's no histrionics. There's endeavour, there's hard work, there's effort, there's energy, there's a lot of skill now. I mean, the Women's Super League is getting more and more skillful. We're attracting world's best talent alongside England's best talent. It's getting stronger and better. And I think people are respecting what it is. And when you can virtually fill Wembley for a friendly international, which would have been nice if we'd won, but, when you can do that, something's changing. So we're changing, but it's a big change. But you see, I think that's the big excitement for me, because if we can change that, I wonder if we can change people's attitudes to women's in business. I wonder if we can change people's attitudes to the way they are in families. I wonder if we can change attitudes to what's possible. If a little girl wants to be an astronaut, why shouldn't she? If a little girl wants to be an engineer, why shouldn't she? A little girl wants to be a great football player, why shouldn't she? And if we can open that door in football, I wonder if we can open other doors as well. And that for me is the exciting bit of this.
That's fabulous, very exciting. And you mentioned the 11.7 million people that watched the Lionesses in the World Cup semi-final. We've seen this massive shift, even in the last 2 or 3 years. What do you think's been the biggest catalyst?
Well, I think, first of all, we've had a very good marketing team. at the FA who've really focused, simple things like the way, they weren't simple, but things like the way we announce the team, where we use celebrities to announce. So we had everything from Prince William to Bex to, pop stars, I have to say, I didn't recognise. I can't even think of their names, but, everybody else did. Those were fantastic because that gave us massive eyes on the game. So there are two things that I think will grow the game. One is the quality of the product. So we have to keep working at improving the players, the coaches, the way we put on games. The whole thing has to get, the whole product has to get more and more and more professional and look good for people to want to come and watch it. And secondly, it's just getting eyes on the game. And, it's getting consistent opportunities to view, which we don't still have, really. We'd love a slot every weekend that is the women's football slot. It varies. It's on, red buttons, or it's on this, or it's on that, or it's behind the paywall on BT, all of which is great. And both BBC and BT have been fantastic. But the next deal that we do, which will be done in 21, will be done shortly, but for the beginning of 21, has to be a combination of eyes on the game, consistently, regularly, and some behind the wall in order to bring in more money to spend on the game. So, we've made good marketing, good promotion, good coverage, and let's be honest, the quality of the Lionesses. People are not going to, 11.7 million are not going to watch if you're rubbish.
No.
And those girls deserve all the credit, all the plaudits that they can be given, because many of them haven't really been supported until very recently, if you look at it. There was, as youngsters, they cut their hair and called themselves all sorts of things in order to play in boys' teams. And, but they are fantastic people. And I thought, not just were they great players, but I thought they conducted themselves magnificently, even under some pretty heavy provocation against Cameroon. I thought they did exceptionally well as people.
Women, yeah, absolutely. It was about a year ago now, actually, wasn't it, that the FA unveiled the biggest ever investment in UK women's sport by brand, when Barclays became the first sponsor of a WSL, 3-year partnership and 10 million bandied about. And obviously a really exciting element that you've alluded to before was the schools partnerships. So how is that going and progressing? Are you pleased with that progress this year?
The Barclays investment is fantastic because it's the first time we've had a major sponsor who stepped over the line for the women's game only. Now, I know they have the men's game in other ways, but this was really important to us, to the FA and to the women's game. So they've been and I think what's great about them is not just that they're sponsoring this and everybody understands sponsorship. This isn't a sponsorship, this is a partnership. And this is about Barclays themselves striving to improve the opportunities for women within the company and using this as a way of promoting women's excellence, women's pathways, all of the things that we've talked about. And really early on, we had the conversation about, they wanted the Super League as their main feature brand, but we talked about, what's really important is how do we get youngsters into this game at grassroots level. So they have funded 100 football school partnerships, which gives us a reach to about 6,500 schools. And the way they've done that is they've invested in people in each of those partnerships to be advocates for what we're doing, what we're trying to do, how we're driving change, organising teacher education. And we have a team of 25 people at the FA, all physical education experts, trained physical educationists, and those 25 are running all our teacher training. So we're training teachers to deliver, not importing others to deliver. And I think that's a huge message that, I've been a big advocate of. We need to skill up our teaching workforce, not substitute it with other people. So right now, early signs are really good. Very exciting to see the numbers that are starting to come out. We've worked with Disney to produce a lunchtime and after-school programme as well. So we've got curriculum input with our PE team. We've got lunchtime opportunity, after-school opportunity, and Barclays have made that all possible. And I'm really excited about where it's going and the potential, depending on resources, but the potential to take that to every school in the country is incredible.
Amazing, wouldn't it? I must say on Disney, I was a bit cynical at first on the Disney princess, but actually it's not that at all, is it? It's The Incredibles, it's Guardians of the Galaxy, it's Marvel characters, it's actually the bigger Disney. So anyway, so I wanted to put that out there, that it's the amazing elements of Disney that inspire.
It's one of the things that was really hit you in the face when you first went into the FA was that football was for certain girls, it wasn't for all girls. And we've got to make it for all girls. Yeah. So I don't mind if we associate it with femininity and feeling good about yourself. I want girls to do that. I don't think playing football means you've got to abandon those things. Yeah. I just think what we've got to value is being physical, athletic, rosy cheek from being outdoors. Those are the things we want to value, not makeup and sitting silently in a room looking at pictures of yourself. If we're going to change participation, we've got to change children's perceptions of themselves in that environment. So aligning it with that sort of, so you don't have a dissonance between being feminine and being athletic. You have I can do both those things. Disney's been great, and Claire Daniels, who works in our participation team, is a genius in terms of the way she's worked with them to develop the materials, to develop the stories. It's great stuff. The kids love it.
Very excited. And you mentioned, obviously, it's less of the marketing team and fabulous Marjana, all that she's done. It felt like last year there wasn't a week didn't go by we didn't hear another sponsor coming in to support the Lionesses and the women's game. So what do you think other sports might learn from what you have done as the FA in terms of
Marjana for a start?
They can't have her though.
No, they can't have her. She's been excellent. But we also have Georgina, who runs the marketing team, and we've had fantastic support from within the FA. You do have to pinch yourself sometimes. I mean, football is football. It does attract people who want to get engaged with it. But I think it's a combination of being unafraid to market your sport differently. You know, Disney is an example. Being unafraid to tackle the core issues. So I knew from the get-go we needed to put football into schools, but I knew we couldn't do it straight away. We'd got to build our reputation and find the resource to do it. So we did Wildcats. And Wildcats has turned out to be a fantastic programme, a community-run programme, 5 to 11-year-old girls, come along, have fun with your friends, get a bit fitter and play some footy. And it's been fantastically successful, not just because it's introduced a lot of girls to football that might not have otherwise done it, but, my colleagues whose daughters all now are in Wildcats programmes say, widen my group of friends, given them massive confidence, much more self-assured and happy. Those things mean just as much to me as being good at football. And might not please everybody in football, I say that, but those things matter. And I think you have to establish your credibility at different levels before you can expect people to come in. And then I think in women's sport, we're not looking for people who simply want to stick a logo on your shirt. We're looking for partners. And for me, it isn't that they're buying football, they're buying that bigger mission. They're buying that belief that together we can change the life chances of women in our businesses, in society, through football. That bigger mission is what you sell. I think if you try to sell just the product, it's really hard to do that because often we in women's sport don't have the reach, we don't have the profile, we don't have the, the wherewithal that the men's game, the eyeballs on the game. And I think there is something really exciting and different about the women's game because I think you can see that there are companies who really want to be part of that mission. Yeah. It's that belonging thing again, right? Yeah. Can we change society? Can we change women's chances in business and in society as a whole? Yeah, we can. And football's the tool. And I think that's why people are interested in working with us.
Excellent. Clearly you've had an extraordinary impact across your career. What kind of leader do you feel that you are? And have you changed over those years?
Oh, gosh, you'd have to ask the people I've worked with. I'd like to think I am a missionary. So, as I've said on many occasions, I'm not always easy to handle because I'm very driven, I'm very determined, and I'm not easy to say no to. But if you work with me and alongside me and you're part of my team, I'd like to think you feel empowered, you feel taken care of, you feel valued, and you can be assured I'm going to help you get to the very top of whatever it is you want to do because I'm a coach. I'm fundamentally a coach. Yeah. So I coach my team as opposed to tell them. I will disagree with them, but in the end, I'll let them go where they think is the right place to go, because that's important. So I'll always challenge, but if they withstand the challenge and say, no, we still want to go that way, I'll say, okay, so be it. It doesn't always work out, but that's how people learn. You can't learn for people. Very wise man called Jim Greenwood, who was a rugby coach at
He was my personal tutor at Loughborough.
Lovely man. Yeah, he said to me that great coaches were not people who knew what to tell you to do, but people who knew to tell you where to look. In other words, great questions rather than just giving answers all the time. And I'd like to think that's what I am like as a leader internally. Externally, I think I'm quite hard to handle at times. And I'm sure there are people in the FA will be sad to see me go, but also delighted to see me go, because I have really been a bit of a pain. But if you want to change things, you're disruptive.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to be disruptive for the sake of being disruptive. You know, it's not about taking a hammer and smashing things, but it is about saying, this won't do, this status quo doesn't do. And you have to learn different strategies to tackle status quo. It isn't always thundering in and throwing your fists around. But equally, yeah, I am disruptive, and I will do what it takes to get the job done. But I hoped if you talk to my colleagues, they would tell you they feel very supported and empowered.
Excellent. So for young women now entering the sports sector and coming in today, looking to progress in their careers, what advice would you give? There are a couple of gems of advice you'd give.
Be sure you know your passion. You know, if it's the development of excellence, or if it's using sport to affect change in others, or it's your desire to help humanity through a thing you're good at called sport, then just be clear about what that is. It took me a while to work that out. I mean, certainly my teaching first few years helped me enormously. But, you know, I think it's important you know your passion. And then I think you have to be prepared to put yourself in different environments so you learn. So, you know, if you think about it, I taught in a really difficult environment when I first came out of college. Then I went into a relatively easy environment at Leicester University, where I did a master's degree so I could train, and I think I was called the Assistant Director of Recreation, which was kind of, you know, not a hugely demanding job, but it allowed me to both train as an international player and study for a master's degree. I then moved to Loughborough, this incredible centre of excellence and fascination with, you know, the Sebcos, the Clive Woodwards, the David Moorcrofts. All those guys were students when I was a tutor there. And then I had that yearning to go back to the inner city, so I bobbed back, much to everybody's amazement, did 4 years in the inner city. So my journey has not followed a logic. You know, if you've got in your mind some sort of pathway to the top, it doesn't work like that. So follow your mission, but allow yourself to go with those opportunities that come your way that might not make a linear sense, but ultimately will fall into place. So, you know, here I am at a ripe old age of 110. You know, if I drop into football and suddenly all my worlds come together.
Yeah.
And so you go, crikey, now I know why I did inner city work, now I know why I did Youth Sport Trust, now I know why I did UK Sport. But did I know that's where I was going? Yeah. No, I didn't. So find your passion, work blooming hard, follow your dream, and don't be frightened to move around.
What an extraordinary woman. I'm so grateful to Sue for finding the time to speak with me. You can see why she's had such an extraordinary impact on the sporting landscape. And thanks also to Barclays for sponsoring this series of The Game Changers. Their support enables us to take the stories of these amazing women to a whole new audience. I'd love to know what you think about The Game Changers. So please do leave a review or give us a rating, or you could message me on social media at Sue Anstis, or find the podcast at The Game Changers on Twitter, Instagram or Facebook. It's been incredible to hear how inspired people are by the stories of these fearless women in sport. If you could spread the word about the Game Changers podcast across your own networks too, that would be brilliant. And why not encourage your friends, family and colleagues to listen as well. Next week, I'm talking to Jo Tung, football agent, director of Women in Football and an ardent campaigner for equality in sport and the media. Jo spent 10 years editing 606, BBC 5 Live's flagship football phone-in, and is now CEO of Tongue Tied Management, a leading sports agency specialising in talent management and production.
Press boxes were very, very intimidating. There were lots of assumptions. You'd turn up to collect your media pass and you'd be directed to the catering door, or you'd go into the press room. Where's the team sheet, love? Where's the coffee?
The Game Changers. Fearless women in football.